Well, welcome back, folks. This is part 2 of the video series on getting or stripping the old fuel tank liner out that the previous owner has installed. And if you're curious where this all started, go back to the first of this series on this fuel tank. And I talk in more detail about what we found inside there, and we did a scope around and see what was going on. I want to update you today on my progress of being able to seal the tank so that I can go ahead and use MEK, methyl ethyl ketone. Again, warning, if you don't know what you're doing with MEK, I would not recommend you use it. I've worked with it before, both at home and actually many years ago at my employer. We worked with MEK to some degree, so I have some familiarity with it and the safety protocols around using it. Nonetheless, I really haven't done much with this, to be honest with you, since the first of this in this series of videos, in probably a week or so, because I've been working on other things associated with the Suzuki project that you'll see in other videos coming up, or perhaps maybe you even have seen by now. I'm not sure about the series and how I'm going to release them all yet, but because I'll release them as I go. But nonetheless, it's been probably a better part of a week, and all of my effort on the tank has been around trying to seal this fuel cap opening. And I've taken a lot of different approaches to this, and virtually all of them were failures except for the very last one. But before we get to that, I did want to just briefly show you. I found this little piece of, I think it's some kind of a silicone inside of the tank here. As I was rinsing it out and fiddling around, I had actually a hard time getting this out because it is silicone and nothing would stick to it, and it was way down in there. And I eventually, as you can see, did get it out, but I don't know really what that's from, but it's clearly a piece of silicone, and I did fish that out. Back to the tank. Ultimately, after having gone through a number of different iterations of sealing, and let me show you what I'm talking about. My first thought, I think I shared this in the previous video, was to seal the cap here. And that is the original rubber or vinyl of some type of gasket. That does not seal at all, I can tell you. If I put this on the tank right now, put fluid in it, turn it upside down, and I used, again, mineral spirits or thinners for all my testing because it's easy to work with, it's relatively safe, and I certainly wasn't going to use MEK for testing purposes. But nonetheless, this leaks like a sieve. This does not seal at all. It's quite hard, and I pretty much knew that going in. So my thinking was to use this Forma gasket. This is a very good product, by the way, and I attempted to seal the lip here, the raised lip of the tank, with a generous dose of this. That didn't work. Then I used made a couple of different gaskets. I have all kinds of gasket material in my inventory, all different thicknesses, all different types. This happens to be cork, and this is some kind of a fiber. I don't know exactly what it's made out of, and I tried different thicknesses, and I tried different iterations of just using a gasket, and then I use a gasket with this Forma gasket, a combination. None of those worked. I ultimately went to this super high tack gasket sealant. This is also a very good product. I had this in my inventory, and I tried that. I put that around the rim of the tank. I put a layer around the gasket here on the cap with a paintbrush. Let it tack off, which you're supposed to do according to the instructions. That didn't work. When I turn it upside down, eventually it would leak. And most of the time, these will leak within 10 or 15 seconds. I didn't really have to hold it upside down very long to see how long it would take for the mineral spirits or thinners to start leaking out. I even considered going to this RTV right here. This is a gasket dressing and seal. This is also a very good product. This is a silicone. I wanted to stay away from silicone if I could, because silicone actually acts as an adhesive. And my concern was that I'd end up gluing this cap to the top of the tank and would have a heck of a time getting it off. So this would have been my very, very last resort. I did not end up using this, but I considered it, to be honest with you, but I knew I would have trouble getting this apart. And so I was, racking my brain, what other solutions could I come up with? So I went all the way back around to actually what was one of my first ideas. I don't think I mentioned it in my previous video, and that is just taking a piece of inner tube. This is an old inner tube. I usually save a few of them, keep them around. This actually happens to be from one of the tubes I pulled off the Honda CT70 last summer when I put new tubes in it. And then what I did is I just made a gasket, like you can see here. Then that is sized and such that it'll fit right down in that groove like that. I think you can see that right there. It nests in there nicely. And then, without any sealant at all, I did use a little, let me show you here in case you're not clear, dielectric grease. I put a little dielectric grease around the lip of the tank because I wanted this to slip. And this actually worked. I think it conformed well enough to the shape. Let me get this off of here if I can for you. Easier said than done. It conformed well enough to the shape of that gasket, which is kind of a compound shape. It's dish shaped in there, I think you can see. And there's a little remnant of some of the sealants that I tried using, some of these different sealants. I think it conformed well enough that when I put it together, it actually sealed. And then it didn't leak initially at all, so I left it overnight upside down with mineral spirits or thinners in the tank, and this did not leak at all. I did look online to see if rubber is reasonably MEK resistant, and generally it is, because obviously since I'm going to turn the tank upside down with MEK in it, this has to be able to hold up to the MEK. So that solution did work. These other gaskets, these different sealants, just didn't work for me. But the simplest solution, just took a pair of scissors, you can see there, and cut it out, laid it in there, and it works fine. So that was the ultimate solution I came up with, the sealing of the tank. I did want to talk a little bit more detail about plugging this outlet here. This is where the fuel tap will go, or the petcock. And I had this on and off a couple times, just fiddling around. In case you're wondering, these are silicone plugs. Both of these are silicone plugs for my powder coating setup. I did take this plug, and if you're wondering about silicone's resistance to MEK, I immersed this exact plug in a glass jar of MEK for a couple of days, and MEK didn't touch it. It looked just like that. So I'm confident that the silicone plug will in fact be just fine and be MEK resistant. This is a plug I had pulled out of here. I had it in, and I'll go through that in more detail in a moment. You can see here it's yellowed a little bit on the end. I think you can probably see that from exposure to the paint thinner, mineral spirits or thinners. That did affect it. Actually, this swelled quite a bit, and I had to kind of pull it out, and then it's shrunk back a bit, but it's not perfect. But it will still reseal, and that will go in something like that. And that's what we're going to go ahead and do next. I'm going to go ahead and show you how I'm going to plug this outlet, and then we'll move on to the rest of the video. To plug this outlet, as I've already shared, I'm going to use this tapered silicone plug, normally used for powder coating, and I'm just going to twist that in by hand to get a nice tight seal. Then what I'm going to do is take a piece of, this is just black duct tape, high quality Gorilla brand duct tape, and I'm going to just make a couple of wraps around like this. And the reason I'm doing this, and I alluded to this I think once before, is the last thing you want when this tank's got MEK in it is for that plug to pop out because you bump it or you know, through manhandling, that becomes free and pops out. So I'm just going to take a couple of other pieces of black duct tape like that and go over the top of the plug. I think you can see there what I'm trying to do. And then I'm going to go at 90 degrees and do the same thing again. And again, the tape is just to hold, to be able to grip onto the, get that back in shot for you, to be able to get back, to grip onto that silicone plug, because I don't want it becoming free. Then I'm going to take this little worm clamp, just an inexpensive small worm clamp. I've got a lot of these in different sizes over the years. I've accumulated as well. I got a whole bunch of them, all different sizes, that not only for my motorcycle projects like this, but from, you know, household projects over the years, like shop projects, barn projects, etc. It expanded enough that it popped out of the clamp, so I just had to restart it. And I'm going to push that down, the clamp, so that I get a good grip here around the base. Of the outlet, the threaded portion. And just snug that up. You don't have to get crazy with that. In fact, you'll damage your clamp if you over clamp those. So that's now resealed. I have dried all the previous paint thinner out of the tank, so the tank is dry inside. So there's no thinners in there right now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay some masking tape around the mouth here of this tank to protect it in case I do get some dribbles. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that. To seal the mouth of the tank, there's a couple of ways you can go about it. You could you know, take pieces like this and cut a half moon and shape them to fit the opening. You can just lay pieces at an angle and work your way around, which is what I'm going to do, etc. I'm going to use masking tape first, and then I'm going to cover that with the black duct tape. The reason being is that duct tape is so aggressive, the adhesive, it might even lift this old paint. And I want to preserve the paint right now as best I can. So I'm just going to take and just put some of this masking tape and work my way around this gas tank like this. Now I'm just taking my fingers to break the corners of the tape here where it fits up around that round shape. The reason I'm using masking tape or sealant tape like you see here for painting, it's much less aggressive, like I said, than the black duct tape. The duct tape is a much tougher tape than this in terms of durability and resistance to abrasion and damage. But this is not rocket science, folks. Just do whatever you're comfortable with. I just want to make sure it's covered as best I can, because if perchance some MEK leaks out, I'm trying to protect the paint for now, knowing of course it will be stripped later, but I'm trying to preserve it for now. As you can see, I use generous amounts of this tape. There's really no reason to be stingy at this point. It's inexpensive, reasonably so. I buy good quality tape. This is, I don't know if you can see it there, Scotch brand. All of my masking tapes, or most of my masking tapes, are Scotch brand. And then for the duct tape, and I've talked about this a number of times, many times before, I use Gorilla brand because I think that's about the best I've found. So I'm going to push that down good, and now I'm going to use black duct tape, and I'm going to cover this with the black duct tape because this duct tape right here is much, much tougher than the blue tape. That bridges a little bit right there. I'm not worried about it. Again, this isn't rocket science. I don't want the blue or the black tape, the duct tape, to touch the paint itself. I want it to touch the blue tape. This might not be necessary if my sealing works like I'm planning for it to. But in the event that it doesn't, this is really just my safety net to try to protect the paint. Some of you might think I'm being anal retentive here. Yep, probably am. Just the way I kind of roll with things like this. The reason I'm not using plastic, like a plastic bag or any other kind of plastic, is it won't hold up to MEK. If you get MEK on plastic, it'll dissolve instantly. I'm not even sure this is going to hold up very well, to be honest with you, if this tape, black tape was exposed. But I'm reasonably confident it'll hold up long enough for me to clean up any dribbles where plastic is just going to melt. We're going to make sure the fuel cap still fits. There's no reason it shouldn't. Yeah, that's fine. Again, the tape is just a safety net in case something goes wrong and I do get leaks. That's all it's for. Nothing more, nothing less. So I've got the tank pretty much prepared. I got this sealed as best I can. I've got this ready to go. All I have to do is, when the time comes, is coat this lip right here like I talked about with the dielectric grease to allow that gasket. I don't want that pinching up or getting bunched up. I want it to seal, so I want it to slip as I turn that down. First thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to put the MEK in the tank, and I'm going to treat the bottom portion of the tank. In other words, I'm not going to do this first. That will be last, because I want to see how the MEK reacts to that liner. And so I'll put the MEK in, let it set, and watch it use a flashlight and see what happens. And if I'm satisfied that it's working out okay, I'll turn it over, let it set. Again, watching it carefully with a bucket underneath it, probably a metal bucket, because if MEK does leak out and it hits plastic, it'll probably dissolve it or soften it at least. A metal bucket or can of some kind like this, and let it set, because there is some coating up underneath here that I've got to get off as well. Now, I'm not going to be able to show you all of that because it's going to be over a period of time. So what we are going to do is I will bring you back later on, and it could be a week or so, I don't know, before I get back to this, we'll see. But I'll share with you the results of where I landed with getting this liner removed. Well, it's been 3 or 4 days or so, and I've been soaking the tank with the MEK, as we talked about before. I want to give you an update as to where I'm at right now. I've positioned the tank over those last few days in all different positions and propped it up, such as like this and like this. It's still got liquid in it, or still has the MEK in it, such as that. And in fact, I did turn it upside down and used that rubber gasket here on the fuel cap, and that worked fine to allow me to get the bottom side of the top of the tank here. Now, I know you can't really see in there very well outside of what you can see through the opening, and I'm not going to put my probe in there this time because there is still MEK in there. And as that probe is made primarily out of plastic, I don't want to expose it to the MEK. So you might be able to see a little bit in there. It did strip. Reposition this tank for you a bit. It did strip the liner, as you can see, and I've been swishing it around as well, gently. I'm not going to get too aggressive with it with the gas cap off because I don't want to slosh it all over the outside of the tank. You might be able to see just a little bit right there on the inside of the opening. Some of the liner is just hanging by a thread, and that's pretty consistent. You know, it's been loosened up. So what I'm going to do now is continue to slosh it around like this a bit and loosen as much of this up as I can. Then I will drain the MEK out. I will save it, I will filter it, and through like a coffee filter to get all the solids out and try to hang on to the MEK as much of it as I can. And I'll dry the tank, and then I will rinse it, I think, with acetone, which I feel better about using for a final rinse because it's safer to use. I'm going to leave this protective section here I made earlier of tape on through the final rinse, but I'm going to use, like I said, acetone to complete the rinse. Flush it clean with clean water, dry it thoroughly, and then I'll just leave it. And at that point, whatever remnants of the liner might be left, I think the radiator shop, if in fact I pursue that route with my painter, can strip it, or I will, when I come back to it later, if I paint it myself, I'll figure out if there's any remnants, how to get those out. I don't think there's going to be much left, to be honest with you. It's pretty, as you can see, it's pretty much broken up into flakes in there. That's pretty consistent. I can look down in there with my you know, with my flashlight, and I can see it, but I know you can't. So I think the MEK's done its job, and now we're going to move on to the finishing up and then the flushing process, and then we'll finish this video when we're just about done with the tank for now. That's going to be it for this video today, folks. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.